Hello and welcome back to the Property Podcast. It's Rob B here with Rob D. This week, the title may sound dull, but I promise you it's going to be a game changer for many.
Okay, intro from Rob B, check. Intro music, check. Must be time to give a little bit of a flavour of what the episode's about. This is how systems can change your life. That's what we're talking about this week. Like Rob said, could sound a bit dull. Systems, well, I want to be hearing about all the new hotspots to invest in. No, trust me, you need both of those things. It's really important, and we're going to tell you why in just a sec. Also, loads and loads of resources in this episode. An absolute treasure trove of things for you to check out. But first, Mr. B, we've not really spoken this week. I feel like I need a little bit of an update of what you've been up to.
Yeah, busy old week. Probably highlights. I'm not going to take you through minute by minute. Listeners, you'll be pleased to know. But highlights would be agreeing to open the first office in the north for RMP, and that's going to be in Warrington.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But in Warrington.
Awesome. Finally, you get to do something in Warrington after talking about it for all these years.
So happy that I've got to do it in Warrington. Fundamental heaven. So I'm very pleased that that's happening, and that'll be opening late March, early April. So very pleased about that. And just because I must be feeling pleased with myself this week, don't often mention deals that I've done. Never mention deals that are coming up, because that's not what this show's about. But with RMP, we did a investment in York, and I'm just pretty proud of that one, because it was within the walls of York. To get any deal, to get property there is hard, but to get any deal in that location is fantastic. So that obviously was very popular and went straight away. But I just thought I'd mention it, because in 6 years of trying, I've never done anything in Warrington, but I've also never done anything in York, never mind within the walls. So that was pretty cool too. So yeah, feeling pretty happy.
Yeah, well, I know bad luck happens in threes, but if good things do as well, then you've got another one coming up, because that's two really good things in a week. York is a fantastic place. I was there a few months ago, and yeah, getting a deal in a place like that is quite an achievement.
It was a little bit of good fortune, but you got to take it when it comes. But we have a third thing, don't we, Rob?
We do. So at the point at which this is being aired, we will have just done our first ever webinar for magazine subscribers. So in the present day, we haven't actually done it yet. It's coming up. But we will have aired. So hope you enjoyed it if you were there. If you missed it, what we're doing is we thought, well, you get a magazine every quarter. It's packed full of goodness. It's written by the best property journalists in the UK. It only costs you a £5 delivered. That's not quite enough value. So we thought that we'd put on a exclusive webinar for all our magazine subscribers, and we'd do it just after every new issue comes out. So we did the first one of those. It's about goals, really popular topic. So we're going to keep on doing those for every issue. So if you're not a subscriber yet, consider doing it. Maybe that'll be the thing that tips you over the edge, because webinars, always popular, always a lot of fun to do.
And unlike most property webinars, 100% educational, which is a nice change as well. So if you haven't subscribed to the magazine, put that right, and make sure you join us on the next webinar.
Yeah, no sales. You won't come on it, and at the end we'll be like, yeah, and if you want the real secrets, you need magazine extra. So make sure you sign up for that. It's only £1,000 an issue. None of that. It's just going to be pure education and loads of fun.
Now, I'm very happy with the news story this week, Rob, because there's loads of graphs.
Yeah, which makes it a challenge to talk about on a podcast. I go, yeah, it's a great graph, and the line goes up there and it goes down a bit. It's amazing. This is a really good one, though. It's from Business Insider. The headline is slightly misleading. There are now two distinct classes in Britain, those who own property and those who are getting poorer. What it really is it's taking through the highlights of a report from the Resolution Foundation, which I've actually read and, well, skimmed, and it is very interesting. What it really is, it is about housing, but it's also about the disappearing middle class phenomenon that we've talked about many times. That was on the cover of the magazine, and we've talked about it on the podcast as well. They don't actually use that wording, but that is exactly what it's talking about. And there are all these graphs looking at different data points showing how share of income has changed, looking at the costs of things and inflation, looking at growth in different regions, how income has changed for people in work, out of work, retired. There's loads and loads of different charts in here, and they all point so clearly to the same thing, to the fact that while things appear on the surface to be going well, all those gains are being accrued at the top, and people at the bottom aren't getting significantly worse off. They're pretty badly off to start with, so it can't get that much worse. But it's this middle that's getting squeezed, and it's only really getting squeezed in one direction. It's really interesting to see this visualized, and so difficult to talk about on a podcast, but I think it's well worth checking out, because while it's something that you might have listened to us talk about and intellectually go, yeah, that sort of seems to make sense, I see where they're coming from, when you actually see it visualized, it becomes even clearer.
This is definitely one of those podcasts where you need to go to the show notes so you can get the link. So go to thepropertyhub.net/systems. That's thepropertyhub.net/systems. So talking of systems, Rob, should we advise everyone to fast forward for 15 minutes while we go through it?
Absolutely not. Systems are not boring. If you're coming into this episode thinking, oh, systems, why do I care about that? Don't. Systems are really powerful. We're going to talk in more detail about what you can use them for and how to set them up. But there's a perception that systems are boring, and if you're kind of a thrusting dynamic person, you don't have systems. You kind of just you seize things and you do whatever seems like the right idea at the time, and you use your initiative. You don't need procedure, you don't need things laid down. But that's really not true. Systems are brilliant because they allow you to do more exciting stuff, because they save your brain power. They make sure you don't mess up anything basic, and they actually give you the freedom and the flexibility to go off and do more and do better things. It also saves you time and frees you up from some boring things that allow you to go off and do more exciting things as well. Systems are enormously powerful, and if you're on board with that idea already, then great. We've got some tips for how to implement them, and we've got some tools that you can use to help you do them even better. But if you're not quite sold on this concept yet, well, that's okay. That's something that we're going to try and put right over the next 15 minutes.
So why are these so valuable? Well, they're valuable for so many reasons. As Rob said, saving the brain cells, that's big. But also, Rob mentioned, oh, I'm a creative go-getter, I don't need them. It's arguably even more powerful for people like that because, we've got so many ideas and we're always up to new things. But if you want to maintain quality and consistency, it's the checklists or the systems that set you free. A prime example would be that this very podcast right now, we're working to a system. So yes, we're talking freely and our editor has to do a good job every week because we go off on big rambles. But actually, the process of setting it up before and after, we go through a checklist that is the same every single week. So on Friday at 7 a.m. when we start recording, we're not like, what do we do again? It's there. There's a multiple checklist that we work through, from open up the reviews to checking any recordings, deciding on the title, making sure the URL is correct. Are we happy with the news story? Do we need to choose a resource? And the list goes on, as you can imagine. And we just work through every single point. And it also comes down to checking our microphones, things like that, because in the early days, we had to re-record a couple of podcasts because we didn't check our microphones. But now we do as part of our checklist. And as you can see, something so simple has such a powerful impact because it means our podcasts are consistent, the quality is the same, and we no longer have to re-record them because one of us have forgot to turn our microphone on properly. So, a very, very powerful tool. And we'll be giving you examples of how you can use them in property in a little bit. But while we've talked about how it can benefit you as an individual, it can also have much more far-reaching benefits as well.
Yeah, so this is the more hidden benefit of systems. It's the thing that you don't think of straight away, but it's even more powerful, I think. Having a system allows you to outsource effectively. So if you've got things that need to be done, but you don't want to be the one to do them anymore, then of course you can outsource. We've talked about it on the podcast before, how you can find people in different ways to take different jobs off your hands. And in the course of that, we mentioned that if you outsource and so you just say to someone, I need you to find me properties I might want to buy, off you go, then you're unlikely to get a great result. But if you've got a system, then you can just hand that system over. You can develop a system that works for you, so you know that if you follow this system every time, the result that comes out the end is the result that you want. Then you just pass that over to somebody else. They can do it, and they are immediately doing that job to the same standard that you were. So you can outsource without systems, but you're so much less likely to get the result that you want. You're basically just relying on the skill and the initiative of the person who you've given it to. With a system, you remove all that variability. And this is something that we've done over and over again. Over the last few years, we've been starting more and more new things. But in a funny way, we've been getting less and less busy because we've been outsourcing greater parts using the systems that we've developed for ourselves. And it's always easy to procrastinate on setting up a system because it doesn't seem to be like the most important thing you need to be doing right now. And I know that there are loads of occasions where I've waited far too long to set something up and pass it over. But I always regret waiting so long afterwards because it saves so much time. And actually, systems are really easy to set up.
They are. And that's really important to emphasize because I'll give you a real life story. There was a guy who, when he had his business and it was just him, used to say, oh yeah, I see the benefit in systems, but I haven't got the time. And it was just him on his own. And then he hired someone and started to create some systems. And guess what? His attitude changed because he saw the power in them. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, that person was me. I was very resistant to systems. One, because they do sound boring. It does need a brand uplift, systems. Exciting. But the results are exciting. And actually, while it sounds intimidating, they are easy to set up. Now, we're going to take you through on exactly how to do that and give you examples of how to implement them. So the first way of doing this, a nice simple system, is a bit like our podcast system, which is a checklist system. And this works out really well when there's lots of steps, but the majority of the steps are easy to do. So a real life example of this in property would be doing an inspection. Check this room, check the blinds, check the carpet, check the walls. Simple stuff. You don't need to be told how to check the walls. I'm pretty sure everybody listening to this is at a level to know what that means. But it's a simple checklist that if you follow it, you know that you're not going to miss anything. And checklists like that, across everything you do, will really set you free. It's so simple.
And you might be thinking, well, if it's so simple, then why do you do it? If it's really that easy, surely that you could do it without having anything written down, and so could anyone else. Well, maybe, but there's a couple of reasons why it's still worth it. For a start, it completely saves using your brain. You can switch your brain off and just go off and do it. And when you've got loads going on and you're really busy, that's really useful. You've only got so much brain power per day, and you might as well be saving it for something really worthwhile than unnecessarily using it to kind of like walk into a house and go, oh, okay, what should I be doing now? Of course, you'd be able to work it out, but why bother? Just save that mental energy. It also avoids you missing things, and it helps you to maintain high standards. So in the example of the inspection, you could easily forget to check the smoke alarms. If you're just freestyling it, you could easily miss that. If it just slips your mind or you have to rush off at the end, you could go away and not do that, and that could have consequences. If you've got it on a checklist, you cannot miss it because you will only leave when every item on that list is checked. So this is the great thing about it. You can make sure that you do the perfect job every time. So it's really easy. It's really powerful. How do you do it?
Well, because it's easy, setting this up is easy. You just list every step, but think about what the perfect version of this task looks like. This is your opportunity to get it right every single time. So go through and go, right, I'm going to go in, I'm going to check the doors, I'm going to check the paintwork, the smoke alarm. Think of what the perfect inspection would look like and list it out, or whatever your task is. Just list out step by step what the perfect version of that is. And then you have a checklist that allows you to do that every single time. Now, you're not going to write this down on a bit of paper. You can do, but that's not really efficient. You're going to probably use some software. You can use things like Trello, Asana, Process Street. We're going to mention all these again at the end, so don't worry. You can just Google for checklist software. Super simple stuff, but it just saves your checklist so you can use it over and over again. And that's what you want. A process that, once it's documented, makes life easy from there on in.
Okay, so that's checklists. Check. Now, you might be thinking, all right, sounds good, but of course, not everything is that easy. There's lots of things that I do that are more complicated than that. You couldn't just take a checklist, pass that over to somebody else and expect them to do it. And that's true. So there's another type of system that you might use, and that's a detailed process. So if you've got a more complex task, then you just saying the name of each thing that needs to be done isn't enough. You need to go into more detail. So what this really is a checklist plus. So you start with a checklist. You start out by listing the headlines of all the things that need to be done step by step. But then you need to describe exactly what each step involves. So we've got a lot of these in yellow lettings. There are lots of things that need to be done, whether that's pre-tenancy admin or it's checking somebody in. There's lots of things that need to be done where you couldn't just take anyone off the street and say, do this, in the same way as you could sort of say, like, make sure all the light bulbs are working. That doesn't need any more explanation. Lots of things do, especially if they involve software or if there are kind of multiple variables. Things can branch off in different directions depending on what's going on. That's where this detailed process comes in. You've got your basic step by step. And then under each step, you're telling yourself or you're telling the person who you're passing it on to exactly what needs to be done to successfully complete each step before you can move on to the next one.
So let me give you an example. If you were going to evaluate a property and you're always evaluating or assessing a deal, you wouldn't just say, step 1, check Rightmove. You could, but that check on Rightmove could be a very different thing to every different person. So you might go, step 1, check Rightmove. Go to the homepage, and the URL would be in the checklist. Take postcode, put it into the box, search within quarter of a mile, make sure the bedrooms are the same, make sure you click sold subject to contract, make sure you do it within quarter of a mile, make sure it's retirement homes are excluded, whatever, and then you get good comparables for that area. Now, notice how many steps there were. I said check on Rightmove, but just to get into that point, there was 4 or 5 steps. Then from there on, it's look for like-for-like comparables, exclude properties that are in not as good condition or superior condition. You can see how detailed you can get into this, and you should, especially if you're going to outsource and give this work to someone else. If you cut corners for yourself, if you've done it enough times, you might be okay. But if you're going to hand this over to someone else, you can't get disappointed with them if they don't do a good job. I asked you to research on Rightmove and you brought me back this rubbish. I'm looking up 2-bedroom apartments and you've brought me back townhouses. Well, if you didn't give them the process, then really, can you complain? So make sure that you go into that level of detail. If not for yourself, certainly if you're going to outsource, it makes a big, big difference. And a way you can enhance this further, if it is software like Rob mentioned, you might do a screencast, which is just a video basically of you recording your screen and navigating around and showing step by step how to do it. So rather than list out the steps in a written form, like I have just said there, like do this, do that, do this, you could actually record your screen and your voice at the same time and say, go to Rightmove, click here, click on this, make sure you click this tab here, and so on. That might be a preferred method for yourself. Or you can do something in between, which is the written instruction and screenshots. So I've often done that in the past as well, where you take screenshots. So make sure you do this and then a screenshot of what that looks like. So you can really level up and build really, really comprehensive systems. Why would you do that? Well, it means there's going to be less errors and you're going to get the job to the standard and the quality that you want done every single time.
Okay, so we've given you the why, we've given you the how. Now let's try to inspire you with some examples of systems that you can use in property. So some different scenarios, property specific, where you can put this into action. So the first one is if you're marketing a property yourself. So you're not using an agent, you're finding your own tenants, you're using the online portals in some way, and there are lots of steps in there that need to be done. So you need to make sure that you've got all the correct information, that the property is prepared. You then need to actually go onto the portal and do everything that needs to be done. So that would be, if you're passing that over, a good contender for a screencast or screenshots of some kind. Then there's everything to do with arranging the viewings. So you might have a checklist that you go through every time somebody inquires to make sure you're asking them the right questions to see if they're suitable before you do the viewing. That's quite a lot of steps. Very easy to miss something out. And that could have consequences. So you might miss something out on the advert that means you don't get the inquiries. You might miss out asking somebody a really important question, like when do you want to move, when they phone up. And then you go and waste time doing a viewing with somebody who wants to move tomorrow, but the property's not free for a month. So that's something that would be a prime contender for a system. Same goes for referencing. If that's something that you're doing yourself rather than passing it over to a referencing company. You really don't want to miss anything there because there could be a document that you forget to check that reveals something pretty shocking about the tenant who you're thinking about having move in. So referencing, again, a simple checklist of all the things that you want to check will make sure that you're doing it to the best standard every time without having to sit there thinking, right, okay, what should I be asking? What should I be looking for? You do it a couple of times, you write it down, you'll get it right every time. And another absolutely brilliant contender for a system is all the pre-tenancy admin that you need to do. So again, say you're self-managing, you've just done everything I've talked about, you've got a tenant ready to move in. There's absolutely loads of stuff that you need to do in terms of taking the deposit from them, issuing them all the things that you legally need to give them, making sure that they sign for the keys, making sure that they sign and return the inventory. There are so many steps. None of them individually is that hard, but you can imagine if you're doing this at the same time as trying to complete on a new property and do your job and things are going on at home, you could easily miss one of those things. And if you pass it over to somebody else, they could easily miss one of them as well. So that would be a perfect contender for having a system. So hopefully with some of these examples, you're seeing some of the things that we talked about at the beginning, how it makes sure that you get the right result every time. It removes the need for brain power. It means you can pass it over. But there are plenty more examples as well.
There are. The list is endless. It's really up to you, but here's a few more for you. Check-ins and check-outs. Loads of steps. Don't forget the meter readings. And there's loads in there, so make sure you checklist that out. Assessing a deal, a more detailed process, especially if you want to outsource that, which can be easily done if you take the time to create that process. Conducting a viewing. What does the perfect viewing look like? Well, list it out and make sure you follow that routine every single time to maximise results. And of course, doing your own reviews, whether that's your annual review, a monthly review, or for some of you, maybe you do it weekly. Looking at your portfolio, assessing where everything's at, and making sure you go through the same steps every single time. 90% of the meetings I attend every week have a process. What's going to happen during the meeting, what the outcomes are, it's all in there. Means that when I walk into a meeting, it's not the first 10 minutes going, so what are we here again for? We know it's all in there and we just go, and it means we can be efficient from moment one. So loads there, but loads more. The only thing that's going to limit you is your imagination, but we've given you plenty to get started. But because we're generous so-and-sos, we're going to give you plenty of resources, software and tools to get started as well.
Yes, we are. So all of these are going to be listed in the show notes. So thepropertyhub.net/systems. Just mention them all quickly now. There's a book called The Checklist Manifesto, which is well worth a read. That gives lots of really great examples from far beyond property and things like surgery and air traffic control and things like that of the power of checklists, how something really simple can have big results, and gives you some practical tips as well. So that's a really good book for getting you more into the mindset of this kind of thing. In terms of software, there are various different things that you could use to actually list your systems out. So Trello, no surprise, we talk about a lot. We use this in Yellow. We have a board that's the repository of all our systems. On Trello, you could have checklists on each card, and that's absolutely perfect for this kind of thing. There's also Evernote, if you're a fan of using Evernote. There's Google Docs, if that's something you're using. Google Docs can be great for the more detailed systems we talked about because you can embed screenshots in there and you can get into loads and loads of detail. There's also some specialist process software called Process Street. And again, this is really great for the detailed stuff because you can embed videos in there, you can do all sorts, and it's designed exactly for this purpose. And then there are tools as well that you can use in conjunction with those. So one of them is Jing, and that is a really easy way to do screenshots and screencasts. So we talked about using a screencast to show people how you do something on your computer, for example. Well, Jing is a really easy way of capturing that without needing loads of really complicated software. So you won't need all of those. You'll just need to kind of pick the tools that work for you, but you can go and check them all out and see what's going to work best. And again, they're all listed at the show notes at thepropertyhub.net/systems.
So hopefully if you enjoyed that, we'd love to know what you think. If you've got any other tools that you would add to the mix or any process suggestions that you'd like to share and how you currently use systems, or if you're going to start, how are you going to start? What you're going to begin with? Go to thepropertyhub.net, go to the show notes for this particular podcast, and you can comment in the forum, ask your questions, leave your comments, give your suggestions. We'd love to read exactly what you do, how you use systems, or how you plan to use them. Now, plenty more coming up before we finish, you'll be pleased to know. But before we do, we have to acknowledge the fine, outstanding human and citizen of planet Earth, Sean Brum, who's left us a 5-star review. And Sean says, I'm 26 and just finished Rich Dad Poor Dad, amongst others, following your recommendations in the podcast, and I am buzzing with motivation to get down the property investment road. I'm still not sure where to start, but the podcast is a fantastic move in the right direction. About 7 episodes in, I'm purchasing and reading all the books you recommend, and I'm using Evernote now and feel super positive about moving forward. I hope to make use of some of your services in the future so I can give back. Thanks, from Sean. Well, Sean, if you've bought a few books by episode 7, you're probably going to be bankrupt by episode 200 at some point. It's like the amount of books we talk about. Rob D's probably published about 100 by the time you get to catch up. So, but at least you'll be extremely, extremely knowledgeable. That's the main thing. And they're great books. Which leads us on to next week, Rob.
Yeah, next week, looking forward to this one, we're talking about 5 non-property books you should read to be a better investor. We know that you love book recommendations. We love giving book recommendations. We love receiving book recommendations. So next week, we're going to be talking about 5 very diverse books that we haven't mentioned before. So if you have listened to every episode, well done. And you've heard us mention plenty of books, no repeats. These are going to be new books that we think that you should be reading to be a better investor. And as if that weren't enough, in next week's episode, there is a way that you can get even more book recommendations.
There is. The magazine, where you get the webinar now included as well. In the next issue, we have a top 5 non-property books that you should be reading, different again to our list we're giving. So even more stuff for you to read. So we are bookworms. We do love a good book. And the great thing is, while these may not be property books, they will supercharge your property activity because the lessons you can learn from them are absolutely fantastic. So make sure you join us for next week's podcast and make sure you sign up to the magazine. And also, make sure you get along to the meetups. Wow, it's come around quick. Next week, it's meetups time. First Thursday of every month. Loads of them up and down the UK and across the planet. They are growing so fast, Rob. Record numbers again last month, which was absolutely awesome. This month, I'll be off to Waterloo. Tempted to sing the song there. Nearly went a bit ABBA, held back. But I'll be off to the Waterloo meetup, which I'm very excited about. I've not been since it's moved venue, so that's super cool. And Rob, you're going to let us know next week, you sneaky so-and-so.
I know, don't like to be pinned down, keeping my options open. We'll see who's going to offer me the biggest bribe to turn up, or maybe the biggest bribe to stay away. Not quite sure. So regardless of where we're going to be, make sure that you are at one of them. There will be one near you, I'm sure. Go to thepropertyhub.net/meetups. It's free. Go book your place. Go and get out of the house, meet some lovely property people, and supercharge your investing. Costs you nothing. Okay, so let's leave you with a little checklist to go away with. So step 1, go and book yourself onto a meetup, thepropertyhub.net/meetups. Step 2, go to the show notes for this episode and check out all the tools and the links that we've mentioned, thepropertyhub.net/systems. And step 3, sit around waiting impatiently for Ask Rob and Rob on Tuesday and the Property Podcast again on Thursday. We look forward to seeing you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Property Podcast. For show notes, all our past episodes, and to leave a review, go to thepropertyhub.net/podcast.